Many Americans think of Messianic Judaism as an offshoot of the Jesus movement of the 1960s, but this specific cultural expression has deep roots in movements going back at least a century before. Our guest today, a Jewish believer in Jesus and historian of the movement, Dr. Gershon Nerel, has spent decades studying the history of Jewish believers in Jesus in Israel. And he's here to give us a bird's eye overview from the Ottoman period all the way through to the present day. He'll also share his thoughts on Jewish believers declaring independence from the mainstream organizational church and rethinking their discipleship from the ground up. You're listening to Messiah Podcast, where Jesus is Jewish and that changes everything. Messiah Podcast is a production of First Fruits of Zion. Create a free account at ffoz.org to start exploring the Jewish foundation of your faith and receive a free book from our store.
Let me introduce you to my teacher, the rabbi from the Galilee.
Well, welcome to Messiah Podcast, Messianic Jewish historian, Gershon Nerel. How you doing?
Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you.
It's great to have you on. We've been talking behind the scenes about having you on like forever because we're really interested in the history of Messianic Judaism. And what I was told is that you actually did your graduate work at Hebrew University and your dissertation was on the history of Messianic Judaism in Israel. Is that correct?
Well, I think I did a postgraduate dissertation at the Department of Comparative Religion in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So wow. I had an opportunity to write, actually, in a miraculous way. The Lord Yeshua, really my Savior and Son of God, He opened a door which was something marvelous. I came with a very specific topic, and that is Messianic Jews in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, not just in the state of Israel, which means I covered a period of half a century, 50 years from 1917. That's the time that the British rulers came to this country, until 1967, the Six-Day War. So that's a very, very formative period. In the middle, we have 1948, the establishment of the State of Israel. And I wanted to find out what happened with Jewish Yeshua believers in this land before and after the establishment of the State of Israel.
Wow.
So it was really a miracle because I had to show my primary sources, and they were all missionary stuff. And I was almost sure that they are going to kick me out with this material. But really, really, by the grace of the Lord, the opposite happened. They said, here we have something new. Here we have something that we know nothing about. We want you to carry on with this project. And I was, from the very outset, I made clear that I myself am a Jewish believer in the Lord Yeshua. So I thought they will say that's an obstacle, but it was not. They said, okay, you can provide us a perspective of an insider, an inner look at what had happened. So that was very encouraging for me. And then I started a journey which lasted about 7 years. It was completed about 30 years ago. And I was really very grateful to the Lord Yeshua that He allowed me to do this in the institution which is the flagship of Jewish studies in Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's remarkable. You talk about those primary sources that you
Yes.
used. How did, like, this is something that I think about sometimes, because sometimes I'll hit on a topic that I don't know anything about. And I think, okay, so where can I go? So when you were looking at to find these sources, like what are the sources for Messianic Judaism of that time period in Israel, and how did you find them?
Okay. In fact, I was already collecting materials on this topic before I started my academic research in Jerusalem, because I was interested in the developments of this movement. And I was quite aware of the fact that almost 100% of the people involved, they were missionaries. They worked with a mission, they worked with an organization that gave them a salary, and in this way they could witness about the Lord Yeshua. So I had to get access to the missionary archives. And this was not easy because, for example, one of the great organizations is the British LJS, London Jew Society, which is also called CMJ, Church Missions. Today it's not missions, but ministry to the Jews. And,
Okay.
and they sent their archives to Oxford, to the Bodleian Library in Oxford. But some of the material remained here in their offices in Jerusalem.
Oh.
So I worked on that. That's one point. The other point, so I had to travel to the Bodleian Library in the UK. And
Cool.
then another mission is the Christian and Missionary Alliance. They had their archives in Colorado Springs in the US, in Colorado. So
Okay.
I had to travel there. A third place is in Helsinki, Finland, because the Finnish mission was also involved in many
Okay.
activities, particularly during the mandate period. And I knew personally certain figures that could provide me information colloquially or with their materials, all kinds of personal archive of leaders, key personalities that were in this country. So this was a long process of collecting the materials, not only in Hebrew, of course, much of it was in English, and the other materials were also in Yiddish. I know some German, so I could cope with Yiddish because, again, I must say, by the grace of the Lord Yeshua, I could put my hands on the private personal archives of Moshe Immanuel Ben Meir. Did you hear this name?
Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah.
I knew his wife. For example, she is a Finnish person. She converted to Judaism. And she kept all his materials, which now I have in our archives here in these cupboards in Yad HaShmona. So it was really exceptional materials, manuscripts, all kinds of manuscripts, all kinds of journals. And much of it I already could publish. Relying on this material, I published already quite a lot, both in Hebrew and English.
Wow.
So it was a kind of Sherlock Holmes, detective work, to go and search and find the materials, if possible, to get the original, if not to make photocopies.
Sure. Sure. I was actually picturing sort of the Indiana Jones map with the red line going all the way around the world.
Yeah, in
That's
a way.
that's really
I mentioned
cool.
Sherlock Holmes, but it could be Indiana Jones as well. But
Yeah.
I am talking
We
about
just need to get you one of these.
I'm talking about real material. I am talking about authentic material, which is really amazing.
It is amazing. Now, I have a couple of follow-up questions to that. One is you said you have these archives right there with you.
Yeah.
I've never heard of a Messianic Jewish archive in Israel. Can you tell me more about where you are?
It's in the process. It's being developed.
Okay. And where is that you are now?
That's at Moshav. Moshav is a small village, a cooperative village of Messianic Jewish, not necessarily Jewish, let's say Messianic believers in Yad HaShmona near Jerusalem. We are about 15 kilometers west of Jerusalem, very close to the highway, road number 1 between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. So I hope you will have an opportunity to visit and
Yeah,
to
that'd be
tell
great.
me and then to tell me what you're interested in.
Yeah. Wow, that would be fantastic. I haven't been to Israel since I was about 7 years old. I'd love to come back.
I think that in our archives we have a complete material of Avram Poljak.
Oh, wow.
In English, first in German, in English, in French, his booklets. He wrote many booklets.
Yeah.
He was a very prolific author, and also some photographs. And of course, the menorah, the 7-branch menorah, that's original of the Avram Poljak group, and also some other artifacts that they used. For example, their flag with the cross and the Star of David, and so on.
Wow. That having that repository is, I think, has to be so valuable for the Messianic Jewish movement. You know, I have my degree of a Master's of Divinity in Theological Studies.
Yes.
But as I learned about theology, I developed a passion for history. Because, you know, like from a Jewish perspective, you don't have theology without history. How do you know about God? Well, it's through the historical events, right? It's through God's revelation on Sinai. And
I saw, for example, that you wrote this book about rethinking or reconsidering the 5 soli of Martin Luther. And in a way, the so-called Messianic movement is the daughter or a son of the 16th century Reformation. But personally, I don't like the term Messianic Judaism, particularly in Israel, because the term Messianic is used for all kinds of directions and peoples and groups, not necessarily. It doesn't point necessarily to Jewish believers in the Lord Yeshua. I think we have to get rid of this term Messianic Judaism and use the term Yeshua Judaism. That's very clear about which Messiah we are talking about.
yeah, because there are other claimants, there are other movements that would say it's someone else.
For example, the Chabad movement. They are Messianics by definition. Everyone who believes in a certain Messiah is a Messianic. And I want to emphasize and to be clear that I'm talking about Messiah Yeshua. And that's why I think the proper updated terminology for today is Yeshua Judaism.
All right. We'll see if that catches on. It may.
I'm not sure, because within our own circles, people know what Messianic Jews are, but outside of our own circles, people don't know. If I say Messianic Jew, many will ask, which Messiah do you mean?
Really? Wow. Wow, that's something I wasn't aware of. The conversation looks different over there than it does here. That's interesting. That's
Yes.
really interesting.
By the way, the term Messianic is also very much ridiculed today in the political circles. Many opponents of Bible believers, of prophecy believers, of settlers, they are called Messianics as if they are lunatics. I often use the term JBY, Jewish believers in Yeshua. And then it's very, very clear about whom we are talking.
Okay. Yeah. It reminds me of a book edited by Oscar Scarsane and Radar Valvik, Jewish Believers in Jesus.
Yes, I knew Oscar.
Oh, wow.
He was connected to the Kaspari Center in Jerusalem, and I was one of the editors on Mishkan, for Mishkan in the 1990s.
Cool.
And so he wrote about the early JBY.
Right. Yeah, the first 3 centuries or something.
Yes, 3, 4, maybe 5 centuries. I was interested in the last 2 centuries. It's a continuation, but very different, in a very different way, because we are so much influenced by the Christian churches.
Yeah. So it's going to look different. Well, so let's get into a few of the key players here. You mentioned Avram Poljak. You mentioned Moshe Emmanuel Ben Meir. When we look at 1917 to 1967, can you walk us through a little bit and tell us sort of who is holding the flag?
Jacob, I must tell you something. In my understanding, we have to begin in the Ottoman period, in the middle of the 19th century, and particularly towards the end of the 19th century. In Ottoman Jerusalem, for example, one of my discoveries was that there existed a Jerusalem Hebrew Christian Association in 1898.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It is.
1898. So I want to mention names such as Bernard Helper. He was one of the leaders of this Jerusalem Hebrew Christian Associations between 1898 and 1904. He was the patron. He was a wealthy person. He was the manager of the Thomas Cook travel agency in Jerusalem.
Wow.
So he was the patron of this association, and the president of the Jerusalem Hebrew Christian Association in the end of the 19th century was Dr. Morris Julius Franklin, an American MD. He was the president of this group. Very interesting story. And then we have, for example, one of the members of the Jerusalem Hebrew Christian Association was a person called Albert Abramson.
Oh.
Hebrew Christian, born in Jerusalem. He then joined the British Army and came with General Allenby in 1967 when they conquered the land. And what is interesting about him, that he held the position of the second land commissioner in Mandate Palestine. That's a key position, controlling the land. So these are people from the late 19th century already. And then the people in the mandate period, those who Moshe ben Meir knew, for example, Shabbatai Rohold. Rohold is an amazing figure, amazing. He was the one, by the way, who established the American Hebrew Christian Alliance.
Oh, wow.
In Toronto and then in the US. And other persons who lived here during the mandate period. I have published quite a lot about these figures, but most of that is in Hebrew.
Oh, we all have to learn Hebrew then if we want to know about it.
You have to learn Hebrew, or I have to translate this into English. But I don't have time because I'm writing all kinds of things, and I want to...
You're out there doing the research and stuff.
Yes. So these are just a few names, but to mention also Leon Levison. Did you hear about Leon Levison? Sir Leon Levison. He was the first president of the International Hebrew Christian Alliance. Very interesting figure. He was born in Safed in the Galilee, became a Christian in Safed, and then was invited to Scotland, to Edinburgh. And he became a Scottish Christian, but Jewish Christian. Very interesting. But this is a story in itself. So I'm giving you just some name. For example, also Chaim Chaimov. Chaim Chaimov, he actually is my own father-in-law. He was one of the pioneers in the mandate period. I received some materials through his widow. And I want to mention also persons like Aili Havas. Aili Havas was a Finnish missionary in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s in this country. She mastered the Hebrew language. And an interesting episode was that when the Hebrew Christians were fighting between themselves, they turned to her, to the Finnish Gentile Christian Aili Havas, to make order and to arrange things.
Wow.
So these are amazing stories.
Yeah, wow. And that's and you've written about it in Hebrew.
By the way, about the Jerusalem Hebrew Christian Association, I wrote in English. It was published already about 20 years ago in a well-known magazine known in France. It's called Revue des Études Juives, but the article itself is in English. So you
Cool.
can, I think you can find it on the internet.
That's great. Yeah. Maybe if we can find that, maybe we'll put a link to that in the show notes so people can go read that. That would be great. Hey, if you're enjoying this conversation, take a moment to like, comment, subscribe, or share with a friend. It really helps us reach more people with the message of the Jewish Jesus and his coming kingdom. You can find more Messianic Jewish teaching and resources from First Fruits of Zion when you visit ffoz.org and create a free account. So you have the continuity from Ottoman Jerusalem through the Mandate period and all the way into the establishment of the State of Israel. That's incredible.
Yes.
I want to ask, like, what changed during that time? What was the biggest change in the movement from the Ottoman period to the time of where you wrapped up your studies in 1967?
One of the big changes was because of Operation Mercy. That was an operation also known by the name Operation Grace. And through this project, the majority of JBUI were evacuated from this land to Britain. most of them. And then actually just a few remained, just a few that made the continuation between the mandate period and the Israeli, in the state of Israel period. And actually after the state of Israel, we have a new, almost a completely new generation of incomers, of new immigrants, of olim that came as believers to this country. Step by step, wave by wave.
Yeah. Well, why did the people have to be smuggled out?
In a nutshell, because the churches, the missions, the many churches and many churches that were active here in the mandate period, they spread a rumor that Hebrew Christians will be in an existential danger in the state of Israel. But that was not true. My explanation for this was that they wanted to smuggle out the Hebrew Christians in order not to allow to establish a Hebrew Christian church, not to allow to the development of a sovereign Hebrew Christian entity. People argue with me about this explanation, but personally I'm confused in that, and I can prove it because I found some inner documents, inner correspondence about the attitude of the missionary groups to the Hebrew Christians.
Yeah, did they just want to continue to have like control, and they were threatened by the existence of an independent.
It was deeper. It was deeper than that. They wanted to insist that in Christ there is no Jew and no Gentile, no Jew and no Greek. So they didn't want to have an influential group of JBY independent of the churches. And this problem continues, in my view, until today. Until today. Because you know the concept of imprimatur. Imprimatur means in Roman Catholic publications, they need a stamp, an authorization of the bishop, of the archbishop about the content of a certain published material. And that's called imprimatur. And that's what, in my understanding, the churches want, both Roman Catholic and Protestant, that we, JBY, in the 21st century, will approve and confirm their decisions in the early centuries, 4th, 5th centuries, and accept them automatically. You see the point?
Yeah.
And Luther, Martin Luther, was also not only your hero, he was also my hero. When I was a teenager, I wrote already in my high school a big paper on him. He did not touch these doctrinal, dogmatic issues which were allegedly sealed and closed in the 4th and 5th century. I think in the 21st century, we have the responsibility to reopen. You wrote about rethinking. I'm saying about reopening, reevaluating the content of the councils, the ecumenical councils of Nicaea, of Chalcedon, especially these two, Nicaea and Chalcedon, and to see what can we accept and what we should reject. But the churches are terrified about even thinking of that.
You know what you're saying? It reminds me of some of the work that Dr. Mark Kinzer has done, because he's written about the Council of Nicaea from his perspective as a Jewish believer in Yeshua. And he's also proposed this framework of bilateral ecclesiology, where there is an independent Jewish expression of faith in Yeshua that doesn't answer to the church necessarily. Like, it stands on its own, and there's dialogue in between, but it's not like subservient. It's not under the umbrella of one of the church organizations. What do you think of his work? Are you a fan? Do you agree?
Well, I know Mark Kinzer. We have participated together in some conferences. But I have a problem with the title of his book. The title of his book is Post-Missionary Messianic Judaism. A few minutes ago, I told you I have a problem with the term Messianic Judaism.
Yeah.
But I also have a problem with post-missionary, because we are not post-missionary. I think what the title should have been neo-missionary. Neo is new missionary, because we don't stop to be missionary. We are all witnesses. We are all emissaries of the Lord Yeshua, right? We don't stop to be actually missionaries. So it's not post. We are not after the missionary task, the missionary goal. But I think he should have titled the book as Neo-Missionary, something new. I'm not sure if we are able to rethink, reevaluate the doctrines, the dogmatic doctrines of the 4th and 5th centuries, because the churches are watching us with a magnifying glass.
We sure are.
And that's why they want to give us the imprimatur, the seal, that we are orthodox enough according to their dogma and their churches.
Yeah.
So I think that Mark Kinzer is a very knowledgeable person, but the title, I think, is wrong.
The Avram Center over there in Jerusalem came under some criticism from anti-missionary groups for sort of pretending to be a synagogue or something like that, but actually being missionaries. And we thought about this a lot as a staff, and we thought, well, we're not missionaries in the sense of trying to tell Jews not to be Jews anymore, but we do have a mission.
Exactly. Absolutely. That's what I mean. We cannot reject the commandment of the Lord Yeshua that we have to be witnesses. We are witnesses all the time. We are emissaries. If you don't want missionaries, we are emissaries. And we do have a message. We have a life-saving message. And we are not ashamed of this message. On the contrary, we are very grateful for a life-giving message. Because the Lord Yeshua is truly the way, the truth, and the life. I tell you, always when I think about this definition about the Lord Yeshua, I am the way, the truth, and the life. You see, that's the Hebrew inscription on the menorah of Avram Poljak. If you look, it says, Anochi, Haderech, Ve'haemet, Ve'chaim.
Wow. We obviously love Avram Poljak here at First Street Design. We love him so much. We named our teaching center in Jerusalem the Avram Center. So he's the namesake. the Avram Center for Messianic Jewish Learning. So, what can you tell all of our listeners about Avram Poljak? Can you just download some information about him to us?
Well, I trust that you want to hear the truth of what I
Well, yeah. You just said Haemet there a few seconds ago. Yeah, we want the truth.
Okay. My attitude towards Avram Poljak is ambivalent. Why is my attitude ambivalent? Because on the one hand, I appreciate Avram Poljak for being a courageous pioneer. He was a courageous pioneer with a profound historical sense. He understood what is the position of the Hebrew Christian. Actually, Avram Poljak refused to use the term Hebrew Christian. Which term did he use? He always used Jewish Christian. In decades, during decades in the 20th centuries, many used the term Hebrew Christian.
Oh, yeah.
Avram Poljak was the one who insisted to say Jewish Christian. And this is not...
It's different.
It's different. It's not just something marginal. This is a very serious point. And Poljak also understood that JBY must detach themselves from the churches, must distance themselves from the historical churches and start something new. And he did spoke about a Jewish synagogue. He did speak about that, particularly about Protestant Christianism, because Roman Catholic Christianity for him was out of the picture anyhow.
Yeah.
He was struggling with Protestant Christianity. So Poljak always pointed to the problem of JBY being missionaries of the historical churches, tied very strongly to the dogmatic creeds, the creeds of the churches. He understood this. So he wanted to distance JBY from the establishment of the Gentile churches. Not because of he had anything against Gentiles, only because he understood they had a different way of thinking. They had a Hellenistic, a wrong way of thinking and interpreting scripture and the situation. I also appreciated Poljak's independence. He was independent in his activities. How much independent? So much independent that he even did not want to connect himself to the International Hebrew Christian Alliance.
Wow.
There was, since 1925, there was a very influential, a very big institution called the International Hebrew Christian Alliance. He didn't want any connection with them. He wanted he wanted something Jewish, something independent. So he did not have connection with the Hebrew Christian Alliance of America, Hebrew Christian Alliance of Great Britain, and so on. But on the other hand, very often Avram Poljak was like a butterfly, moving from one place to another, no stability. No stability.
You mean geographically? You would move around?
Geographically.
Okay.
Geographically. And in order to build something, to establish something, you need stability. You need to endure and remain faithful in one place for decades, in my understanding.
Sure. Yeah, we talk about that in church land a lot. Like the most successful churches are ones where the pastor stays for decades and is able to provide that continuity and build the community.
That's a prerequisite to know the situation, to know the people, to understand what is going on. Otherwise, if you are like a butterfly going always somewhere else, that's a big problem. Much of his behavior was fluctuating like a pendulum, here and there, here and then, and that's a problem. That's a problem in my understanding, because in this way you cannot grow roots, deep roots in one place.
Yeah.
You cannot really understand. And that is so much for younger people to understand. You must be stable. If you have a family, if you have children, stability in one place. Avram Poljak also wrote many things. I appreciated his writings. He wrote about, as I said before, distancing from the historic churches. But in my view, he was not a true biblical Zionist. He did not live in this country. For me, a true Zionism is to move to Israel and to build here a life of a believer in the Lord Yeshua. That's, in my eyes, biblical Zionism. And he did not have children. He did not have children. It wasn't a big difficulty for him to move and live in this country. You know, he ended in Germany. He was buried in Mödlingen in Germany. Not only himself, this influenced also his companions like Agnes Sarah Waldstein, and another companion of his group, which I mentioned earlier, the Baron von Springer. He moved to Switzerland. He died in Switzerland. So you see, I am expecting of such people to be truly Zionist in this land and to give testimony in this land. And from this land also to others. So that's
out of Jerusalem, the Torah will go forth from Mount Zion.
Yes. So that's my ambivalence about Poljak. But he was a courageous person. He had groundbreaking ideas. He understood many things, but the implementation was not good.
That seems to be a recurring theme. Like there will be this something seems like it's happening, or this wonderful spark or an idea, and then someone drops the football. I heard a story of there wasn't there like a Messianic Jewish or a Jewish believers in Yeshua like organization that had like a really nice. There was like they had a center and everything. They had like this location, this wonderful piece of land that was like donated to them, and they owned it, and then they just sold it. Am I remembering this correctly?
Listen, you are just touching the tip of an iceberg. It's just the tip. I made a big research on a place called Abraham's Vineyard. The location was called Abraham's Vineyard. You see, until today, I am furious when I look into what had happened, because it was connected to the International Hebrew Christian Alliance. In 1928, they received a gift, no penny to pay, of 52 dunams in the heart of modern Jerusalem. Today, what you can find is only the name, Abraham's Vineyard neighborhood. What the leaders did there was that after 4 years, only 4 years, they sold the property.
Wow.
I'm asking myself, which vision is that? Which responsibility is that? Which stability is that? They lost, eventually, they lost the property, they lost the money, and what remained is a company called Abraham's Vineyard Ltd. Maybe $10 in the bank, something like that. It was
Wow.
it was valuable in today's terms, millions of dollars.
Oh, for sure.
Millions of dollars. We lost a property where we could have a center, where we could have many things in 52 dunams. And even if the municipality of Jerusalem would take half of it, let's say, for roads and so on, they could remain with 25, 30 dunams. That's a lot in the heart of Jerusalem.
Oh, yeah.
And they sold it. One explanation I have for this, listen to that the leadership in the 1920s, 1930s, was very much involved in what? Freemasonry. Freemasonry.
Huh.
And in my understanding, Freemasonry confused their thinking, their mind, their vision, and their logic.
Wow. I wasn't expecting that.
I wasn't expecting that too. But I slowly, during more than 3 decades, I'm making 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 lead to simple logic.
Wow.
And then I discovered that not only Abraham's Vineyard was sold, other properties which were purchased by money donated for ministry among the Jewish people, other properties in Jerusalem were also sold for business purposes. Very irritating.
Yeah, it is. I mean, imagine the difficulty of getting something like that now. Of
You know what if there would have been a small Messianic center in private land? In Israel, we have a difficulty because most of the land is state land. This makes a big difference. But in the property of Abraham's Vineyard goes back to the 19th century. It was all private land, not state land. You see?
wow.
But everything I'm telling you can be a chapter, a big chapter for itself.
Yeah, I bet. Well, hopefully what we're trying to do over there, the Brahm Center's been there for a while in the same place. Hopefully we can keep a consistent and stable presence over there in that
Very important.
in that learning center, and maybe finish what Avram Poljak started in in a good way.
Yes,
He can finish well. His ministry, his legacy can finish well. That's a hopeful thought.
I think this can be something important.
Yeah. So, as far as Messianic Judaism in Israel today, because you've got the historical perspective, you've seen what it has been for more than 100 years now. What do you think of what is when you look at Jewish believers in Yeshua in Israel now? What's your diagnosis? What's your prescription? Like, what do you see to be happy and positive about? What do you see needs to be improved?
I am really happy that there is a young generation by dozens and hundreds that serve in the army, are part of the society, are part of the nation, are part of our culture, are present. The presence is great. On the other side, I'm very sad that they are very churchy people. Churchy. They have no independent thinking, no freedom from the churches, still under the pressure of the theological, dogmatic pressure of the churches. If someone dares to touch the dogmatic issues of the churches, for example, the issue of the Trinity, problems begin.
Oh, yeah.
Not courageous, not strong enough to learn, to reevaluate, to rethink those things which were sealed already in the 4th and 5th centuries.
Yeah, after all the Jews were kicked out of the church.
And but now the churches cannot kick them out because we are in a sovereign country. We can have our own groupings, our own congregations, and so on. But when the churches discover that you teach something opposite the doctrines and the dogma of the church, you are excommunicated.
Yeah. While we've been talking, while we've been recording this conversation, several messages have come into the work chat about people, our constituents, asking us, "Hey, can you clarify? Can you tell us what you believe about this?" And yeah, it's such a contentious issue. We minister mostly to Gentile followers of Yeshua. And these are people who have gained so much from a Messianic Jewish perspective, is what we call it. And but as soon as we start talking about like the identity of Yeshua and the divine, logos and this stuff, as soon as we start touching on those ideas, people start going wild. It's like, well, what about the Trinity? Do you believe in the Trinity?
In one word, Christology.
Yeah.
Then,
it's a big shibboleth.
Exactly as you say. People get starting mad, wild, and I think that's the big challenge, to be able to reopen, to rethink, reevaluate, which even Martin Luther was not able to do.
Yeah.
He was not able to do that. He did some other things. But I believe in a Messianic Jewish reformation. I believe that Jewish Yeshua believers have a task to complete the 16th century Reformation in matters that Martin Luther did not dare to touch or was unable to touch.
Well, that's a tall order. That's a monumental task.
It is.
Good thing we have more and more Messianic Jewish PhDs. Yeah, we have people who are equipped, I think, intellectually and academically equipped.
Yeah. The real point is that the bottom line is that we personally have to remain faithful to the Lord Yeshua until the very end. That's the simple bottom line, that we shall remain believers like small children, to follow the teachings of the Lord Yeshua. That's really my bottom line of everything we have.
No, that's important. You know, that's what his disciples did. They probably didn't understand everything about him, but they followed him. Their allegiance was with him, and they did what he told them to do. And you know, for me as someone from the nations, just follow. Be a good follower.
Yeah.
That's a really good note to end on. Unless you have any final words for our constituents, anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
We have a great treasure in the Lord Yeshua. A great treasure. And we have also a great responsibility. So in order to be good disciples of the Lord Yeshua, he said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And that's what we have to do, to keep his commandments. And they are not a few. They are not a few. And to study the commandments of the Lord, to understand his commandments, to understand his way, is a lifetime job. And that's my prayer, is that he will continue to help me to remain like a small child and to be ready when he comes back. To be worthy to meet the Lord. It doesn't matter what will happen before, what will happen after. That's not the point. The point is to remain faithful and ready until the end.
Yeah, keep that lamp lit. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. This was an incredibly informative and interesting conversation with Messianic Jewish historian Dr. Gershon Nerel. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. God bless you.
Well, thanks for joining us today on First Fruits of Zion's Messiah podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review along with a 5-star rating. If you want to learn more about the Jewish Jesus, create a free account at ffoz.org and start studying the scriptures from a Messianic Jewish perspective. We'll even give you a free book. Messiah Podcast is made possible by the generosity of our First Fruits of Zion friends. FFOZ friends are people like you who partner in our mission to reconcile disciples of Yeshua with God's prophetic promises to Israel. Tune in next time for more great conversations. Until then, I'm Jacob Franzak. Shalom.
Put your hand in mine together. We will walk in harmony. Let me introduce you to my teacher, the rabbi from the Galilee. Let his word